The untold story of a 10-year-old boy and his neighbor. The bell rang, signaling the end of another school day at Lincoln Elementary in Millfield, a modest suburban town 30 minutes outside of Minneapolis. 10-year-old Oliver Wells gathered his books and papers, carefully tucking them into his navy blue backpack. Unlike his classmates who rushed excitedly toward the doors, Oliver moved with deliberate slowness, his shoulders slightly hunched under the weight of his thoughts rather than his backpack. "Have a good afternoon, Oliver, Mrs. Carmichael said, glancing up from her desk where she was grading papers. Her kind eyes noted his reluctance to leave. "Thanks, Mrs. Carmichael," Oliver replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He liked 5th grade and especially appreciated Mrs. Carmichael's patient teaching style and warm classroom decorated with student artwork and plants on every windowsill. Outside, yellow buses lined the circular drive as children streamed through the double doors, their voices creating a symphony of excitement. Oliver scanned the crowd until he spotted his best friend, Marcus. "Want to come over and play Minecraft?" Marcus asked, adjusting his glasses. "My mom said it's okay if your parents say yes." Oliver shook his head regretfully. "Can't today. I have to go to Aunt Bea's house after school." "Again? That's like every day now," Marcus said, disappointment evident in his voice. "Yeah, I know. My parents are working late at the store again." Oliver kicked at a small pebble on the sidewalk. "Maybe tomorrow." Marcus nodded before jogging toward his mother's waiting car, waving goodbye. Oliver watched him go, feeling that familiar twist of envy. Marcus's mom worked from home as a graphic designer and was always there after school with snacks and questions about his day. Oliver's parents weren't so lucky. 3 years ago, when Oliver was just 7, they had invested their life savings into opening Wells Hardware Home, a small but friendly hardware store in downtown Millfield. The economic downturn had hit many businesses hard, and big box stores on the outskirts of town created fierce competition. To keep their dream alive, both his parents worked long hours, his father handling the store operations while his mother managed the books and customer service. Oliver understood they were working hard for their family's future. He really did. But understanding didn't make the empty house any less lonely or the microwave dinners any less disappointing. The familiar beige sedan pulled up to the curb. Mrs. Beatrice Wilson, Aunt Bea as she insisted Oliver call her, though she wasn't actually related to the Wells family, waved from the driver's seat. A woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked brown hair always styled in a neat bob. She had lived next door to the Wells family for the past 5 years. "There's my favorite young man," she called cheerfully as Oliver climbed into the passenger seat. "How was school today?" "It was okay," Oliver said, fastening his seatbelt. "We started a new science unit about ecosystems." "How fascinating," Aunt Bea replied, pulling away from the school. "When I was your age, I wanted to be a biologist. Did I ever tell you that?" Oliver nodded, having heard this story several times before. Still, he politely listened as Aunt Bea recounted her childhood dreams while driving the short distance to her home. 6 months ago, when Oliver's after-school babysitter suddenly moved away, his mother had been frantic to find someone reliable to watch him during the critical hours between school dismissal and when either she or Oliver's father could get home. Typically around 7 in the evening. Aunt Bea, recently retired from her job as a bank teller, had seemed like the perfect solution. She lived right next door, had already established a friendly relationship with the family, and had enthusiastically offered to help. "I've made your favorite chocolate chip cookies," Aunt Bea announced as they walked up the neat brick pathway to her front door. Her house was a tidy one-story ranch-style home with flower boxes beneath each window and garden gnomes peeking out from the well-maintained shrubs. The interior of Aunt Bea's house always smelled of something baking and the faint scent of lavender sachets that she tucked into drawers and closets. The living room was decorated with floral patterns and doilies, with numerous framed photographs covering most available surfaces. "You can put your backpack in the usual spot," she instructed, gesturing toward a small desk she had set up in the corner of her dining room. "Get started on your homework, and after you're finished, we can have cookies and play a game." Oliver nodded and settled into what had become his routine. At first, he'd been apprehensive about spending time at Aunt Bea's house. He would have preferred to be home, even if alone. But over time, he'd grown to appreciate her attention. Unlike his rushed, distracted parents, Aunt Bea seemed genuinely interested in his schoolwork, his friends, and his thoughts. After Oliver completed his math worksheet and social studies reading, Aunt Bee brought over a plate of cookies still warm from the oven and 2 glasses of milk. "Perfect timing," she said with a wide smile. "I've just set up the checkerboard in the living room. You've been getting so good, I think you might actually beat me today." Oliver grinned, his first genuine smile of the afternoon. He did enjoy playing checkers with Aunt Bee, who took the game seriously enough to make winning feel like an accomplishment but was also a gracious loser on the rare occasions when he managed to outmaneuver her. As they played, Aunt Bee asked about his friends at school, his favorite subjects, and whether he was looking forward to the upcoming school field trip to the Science Museum in Minneapolis. Mom said she might be able to chaperone, but I don't think she can get away from the store, Oliver said, making a move that captured one of Aunt Bee's checkers. "Well, that's a shame," Aunt Bee commented, studying the board. "Parents should make time for important moments in their children's lives." She moved her piece. "King me." Oliver dutifully placed another checker on top of the piece that had reached his side of the board. "Dad says the store needs a lot of attention right now because of the new Hammer Depot that opened across town." Aunt Bee made a dismissive sound. "Those big stores have no soul, no personal touch. Your parents' store is special because they care about their customers." She patted Oliver's hand. "Just like you're special to me, Oliver. You know that, right?" Oliver nodded, feeling a warm glow of appreciation for her kind words. It felt good to be someone's priority. After their game, which Aunt Bee won by a narrow margin, she suggested they bake peanut butter cookies to add variety to Oliver's usual afternoon snacks. In the kitchen, she let him measure ingredients and operate the electric mixer, things his busy parents rarely had time to do with him. "You're becoming quite the baker," she praised as Oliver carefully dropped rounded spoonfuls of dough onto the cookie sheet. "Such a big help to me." As they waited for the cookies to bake, Aunt Bee retrieved a small box from her bedroom. "I have a little surprise for you," she said, her eyes twinkling, "for being such a good helper." Inside the box was a sleek digital watch with multiple functions, including games and a calculator. Oliver's eyes widened. "Wow, thank you, Aunt Bee," he exclaimed, immediately strapping it to his wrist. "It's our little secret," she said with a conspiratorial smile. "I know your parents are trying to teach you about saving money and not having too many luxuries right now while the store gets established. They might think it's too extravagant, but every boy should have something special just for him, don't you think?" Oliver hesitated, uncertain about keeping secrets from his parents. "Maybe I should ask them if it's okay first." Aunt Bee's smile dimmed slightly. "Oh, I wouldn't want to burden them with such a small matter when they're so busy with important things. Besides, it would hurt my feelings if you couldn't accept my gift. Don't you like it?" "I love it," Oliver said quickly, not wanting to seem ungrateful. "It's awesome." "Then it's settled," Aunt Bee said, her smile returning. "Our special secret." The timer dinged for the cookies, and the moment passed. By the time Oliver's mother arrived to pick him up at 7:15 p.m., he had tucked the watch into his backpack, out of sight. "Sorry I'm late, honey," Laura Wells said, looking tired but making an effort to sound cheerful. "How was your afternoon?" "We had a lovely time," Aunt Bee answered before Oliver could speak. "Oliver finished all his homework, and we baked cookies together." "Such a wonderful boy you have. Thank you again for watching him, Bee. You're a lifesaver." Laura turned to Oliver. "Ready to go home, sweetie?" Dad picked up some Chinese food for dinner. Oliver nodded, gathering his things. As they walked the short distance to their house, his mother asked about his day, but her attention was clearly divided as she checked messages on her phone about store inventory issues. At home, Oliver's father, Robert, was setting the table with paper plates and takeout containers. His weathered hands showed evidence of his work: a small cut on one finger, calluses on his palms. "There's my boy," he said, ruffling Oliver's hair affectionately. "How'd that math test go today?" "It's not until Friday," Oliver reminded him, feeling both annoyed at his father's forgetfulness and guilty for feeling that way. Right, Robert said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Well, you'll ace it, I'm sure." Dinner conversation revolved mostly around the store, a difficult customer, a delayed shipment, a competitor's sale they needed to match. Oliver picked at his sweet and sour chicken, thinking about the watch hidden in his backpack and feeling an unfamiliar discomfort about keeping it secret. Later that night, as Oliver lay in bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling, he heard his parents' voices drifting up from the kitchen. "I hate that he spends so much time with Bea," his mother was saying. "Not that she isn't wonderful, but I should be the one helping him with homework and baking cookies." "The store will turn around," his father assured her. "The small business advisor said we're approaching the break-even point. Maybe by summer we can adjust our hours. Hire an assistant manager. He's growing up so fast, Rob. I'm missing it." Oliver turned on his side, pulling the covers up to his chin. He didn't like hearing the worry in his mother's voice. It made him feel like a burden. Before falling asleep, he retrieved the watch from his backpack and placed it in his dresser drawer, beneath his socks where his parents wouldn't notice it. It didn't feel as exciting now as it had when Aunt Bea gave it to him. Instead, it felt heavy with the weight of secrecy. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable routine. School followed by afternoons at Aunt Bea's house, then home for a quick dinner with his parents before homework review and bedtime. Weekends provided more family time, though even then, one or both parents often needed to check in at the store. Aunt Bea's house became increasingly familiar territory. She designated spaces for his belongings, a hook for his jacket, a drawer for art supplies, and even a shelf in her bathroom cabinet for Oliver's things, where she kept a spare toothbrush, his preferred cinnamon toothpaste, and a special Spider-Man washcloth. "Think of this as your second home," she told him one afternoon as she showed him the new additions. "A place where you're always welcome and wanted." Oliver didn't miss the implied contrast with his actual home, where his parents' attention was so divided. The thought made him uncomfortable, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the immediate comfort of Aunt Bea's attention. The gifts continued, small things at first. A comic book here, a candy bar there, always accompanied by the same refrain, "Our special secret." Each time, Oliver would hesitate before eventually agreeing, the discomfort growing but still manageable. One rainy Thursday afternoon, about 2 months after the arrangement began, Aunt Bea unveiled a more substantial surprise, a new gaming tablet, already loaded with several popular games. "Aunt Bea, this is too much," Oliver protested, genuinely alarmed by the expensive gift. "My parents would never." "Your parents don't need to worry about these things," she interrupted, her tone firmer than usual. "I have no children of my own to spoil, and it brings me joy to see you happy. Why would you want to deny me that joy?" Oliver put that way, refusing seemed selfish. Still, as Oliver reluctantly accepted the tablet, something felt increasingly wrong about the growing collection of secret possessions accumulating in his bedroom drawers and closet. That night, Oliver lay awake long after his parents had gone to bed, the weight of his secrets making sleep elusive. He considered telling them about the gifts but worried about their reaction. Would they be angry with him for accepting them? Would they prohibit him from going to Aunt Bea's, leaving him with no after-school supervision? Would Aunt Bea, who had been so kind to him, feel betrayed? With these troubled thoughts circling in his mind, Oliver finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that Aunt Bea's behavior would soon cross lines that would make his current discomfort seem trivial by comparison. Spring gave way to early summer in Millfield, bringing longer days filled with sunshine and the promise of the upcoming school break. For most children, this meant excitement and anticipation, but for Oliver, it created a new concern: what would happen during summer vacation when he wouldn't be in school for most of the day? His parents addressed this one Sunday morning over pancakes, which had become their weekly tradition, the one meal they could reliably share as a family. "We've been talking with Aunt Bea," Laura explained, pouring maple syrup onto Oliver's plate. "She's offered to watch you during summer vacation while we're at the store." "The whole day?" Oliver asked, his appetite suddenly diminishing. Robert nodded, not noticing his son's discomfort. "It's a tremendous help, son. Summer camp would cost a fortune, and with the store still finding its footing." "We know it's not ideal," Laura added, reaching across to squeeze Oliver's hand. "But Bea has planned all sorts of activities, trips to the community pool, the library, maybe even the amusement park in July." Oliver pushed his pancakes around his plate, creating swirling patterns in the syrup. "What about Marcus? Can I still see my friends?" "Of course," his mother assured him. "We can arrange play dates, and you'll have the weekends with us. Dad's training the new part-time employee, which should free up more of our time by midsummer." Oliver nodded, knowing there was little point in protesting. His parents needed to work, and they couldn't afford other options. Besides, many aspects of his time with Aunt Bee were genuinely enjoyable. She was attentive and kind, always ready with a snack or a game or help with homework. Yet something had been changing over the past few weeks, subtle shifts that were difficult to articulate but impossible to ignore. The gifts had become more frequent and expensive. The special secrets had multiplied. And increasingly, Aunt Bee's conversation included comments about his parents' shortcomings. "It's such a shame they miss your baseball games," she'd say after attending one of Oliver's Little League matches when neither parent could get away from the store. "When I was growing up, parents never missed important events." Or, "Your mother should have noticed you needed new sneakers weeks ago," as she presented him with an expensive pair of the latest style athletic shoes. "Good thing you have me looking out for you." These comments made Oliver deeply uncomfortable, creating conflicting feelings of loyalty. He loved his parents and knew they were doing their best, yet Aunt Bee's constant attention and generosity were hard to reconcile with their necessary absences. The last week of school passed quickly. On the final day, Mrs. Carmichael handed out summer reading lists and gave each student a personalized note. When Oliver read his eyes filled with unexpected tears. "Oliver, your quiet thoughtfulness and kind heart make our classroom a better place. I've watched you grow so much this year, not just in academics but in character. Remember to carry that inner strength with you wherever summer takes you. I'll be excited to hear all about your adventures when 6th grade begins. Mrs. Carmichael." The note meant more to Oliver than his teacher could know. And like most adults in his life lately, Mrs. Carmichael saw him without wanting anything in return or making him feel caught in adult concerns. As promised, Oliver's summer days were soon filled with activities planned by Aunt Bee. She proved to be an energetic caretaker, whisking him off to the community pool, arranging educational visits to the local history museum, and ensuring he kept up with his summer reading list. Yet alongside these positive experiences, the uncomfortable elements of their relationship intensified. One sweltering afternoon in late June, after a visit to the pool, Aunt Bee insisted on helping Oliver change out of his wet swimsuit. "Aunt Bee, I can do it myself," he protested, clutching his dry clothes to his chest in the bathroom doorway. "I'm 10. "Don't be silly," she countered, her usual warm smile firmly in place though her eyes held an unfamiliar intensity. "I've been taking care of children since before your mother was born. There's nothing to be embarrassed about." When Oliver continued to resist, her expression tightened. "After all I do for you, Oliver, you can't even let me help you with this simple thing. Do you know how that makes me feel?" The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. She had done so much for him, sacrificed her retirement freedom to watch him day after day. How could he be so ungrateful? Still, he couldn't bring himself to comply. "I just want privacy," he managed to say, his voice small but determined. After a tense moment, Aunt Bee relented with a heavy sigh. "Very well. You're becoming quite independent." Her smile returned, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I suppose that's good, even if it does make me feel a bit unappreciated." Oliver quickly changed in the bathroom, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled on his dry clothes. The incident left him with a sick feeling in his stomach that lingered throughout dinner, which Aunt Bee had prepared with particular care all his favorites, as if to emphasize her devotion. That evening, when his mother picked him up, Oliver desperately wanted to tell her about what had happened, but he couldn't find the words. How could he explain that something that sounded so innocent and adult offering help had felt so wrong? And what if his mother didn't understand? What if she thought he was being difficult or ungrateful? So, he remained silent, carrying the weight of his discomfort alone. The next troubling development came in the form of increasing isolation. Aunt Bee began to dismiss Oliver's requests for playdates with Marcus and other friends from school. "Those rowdy boys would just make a mess of my garden," she explained when Oliver asked if Marcus could come over. "Besides, I've planned a special baking project just for us." When Oliver suggested going to Marcus's house instead, Aunt Bee looked genuinely hurt. "After I've gone to all this trouble, don't you enjoy our time together?" The pattern repeated with other friends until Oliver stopped asking altogether. His social world narrowed to just Aunt Bee during weekdays, with only occasional contact with peers during weekend Little League games when his father managed to take him. Alongside this isolation came increasing secrecy. Your parents wouldn't understand our special relationship, Aunt Bee told him one day as she presented him with yet another gift, an expensive remote-controlled car. They might get jealous if they knew how close we are. It's best if we keep our special times just between us. The growing collection of hidden gifts now filled a large showbox under Oliver's bed. Each one represented a secret he kept from his parents, creating an invisible barrier between them that grew higher with each passing day. By mid-July, Oliver had developed physical symptoms of his stress: stomach aches in the morning before going to Aunt Bea's house, trouble sleeping, and a general withdrawal that his parents noticed despite their busy schedules. "Are you feeling all right, buddy?" his father asked one Saturday morning when Oliver barely touched his pancakes. "You've been awfully quiet lately." Oliver shrugged, pushing his food around his plate. "I'm okay." Laura exchanged a concerned glance with Robert. "Is everything all right at Aunt Bea's? You used to come home full of stories about your day, but lately you hardly mention what you do there." The direct question caught Oliver off guard. This was his opportunity to say something, to let his parents know about his growing discomfort, the secrets, the inappropriate suggestions. Yet fear kept him silent, fear of disappointing them, of creating problems when they were already so stressed about the store, of losing Aunt Bea's affection despite his discomfort with her behavior. "It's fine," he mumbled. "Just the same stuff every day. That's all." His mother studied him for a moment longer, clearly not entirely convinced. "Well, I have good news. The new employee is working out wonderfully, so Dad and I are both taking next Saturday off. We thought we could drive to that water park you've been wanting to visit. How does that sound?" Oliver's face lit up genuinely for the first time in weeks. "Really? The whole day?" "The whole day," his father confirmed with a smile. "Just the three of us." The promised family outing gave Oliver something positive to focus on during the following week, which proved to be particularly challenging at Aunt Bea's house. Her comments about his parents grew more critical and frequent. "Such a shame they bribe you with occasional outings instead of consistent attention," she remarked when Oliver excitedly mentioned the upcoming water park trip. "When you're with me, you don't have to wait weeks for special treatment." Then came a concerning escalation in physical boundaries. Aunt Bee began insisting on hugs that lasted too long, sitting unnecessarily close on the couch during movies, and finding reasons to touch Oliver's hair, face, and sometimes his leg in ways that made him increasingly uncomfortable. When he tried to create distance, she would respond with hurt feelings and reminders of all she did for him. "Your parents leave you here all day, and I give you everything, Oliver. The least you could do is show some affection in return. Don't you love your Aunt Bee?" These emotional manipulations left Oliver confused and guilty. She wasn't hurting him, exactly, yet every instinct told him something was wrong. But how could he explain this to anyone when he barely understood it himself? The anticipated Saturday finally arrived, bringing with it a perfect summer day for a water park visit. Oliver's excitement was palpable as he loaded into the family car, his swim trunks and towel packed in a small backpack. The day was everything he had hoped for, racing down water slides with his father, floating along the lazy river with his mother, enjoying a picnic lunch together on the grassy area. For hours, Oliver forgot about Aunt Bee and the uncomfortable situation waiting for him when the weekend ended. As they were preparing to leave, Laura's phone rang. Her expression grew serious as she listened to the caller. "It's Joe from the store," she said to Robert after hanging up. "The delivery we've been waiting for arrived, but there's a problem with the invoice. They're threatening to take everything back unless we sort it out immediately." Robert's face fell. "Today of all days," he muttered before turning to Oliver with an apologetic expression. "Son, I'm sorry, but we need to stop by the store on the way home. It shouldn't take long." Oliver nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. He understood this was the reality of his parents owning a business. Emergencies didn't respect carefully planned family days. At the store, what was supposed to be a quick stop expanded into a complex negotiation with the delivery company representative. Oliver sat in the back office, flipping through a catalog of hardware supplies, boredom quickly setting in. "This could take a while," Laura said, popping in to check on him. "Why don't you call Aunt Bee and see if she can come get you? We'll pick you up from her house once we're done." Oliver felt a rush of anxiety at the suggestion but couldn't think of a reasonable objection. Reluctantly, he used his mother's phone to call Aunt B, who arrived within 15 minutes, her face a picture of sympathetic understanding that made Oliver's parents feel both grateful and guilty. "Business emergencies, I understand completely," she assured them. "Oliver and I will have a lovely evening. Take all the time you need." As they drove away from the store, Aunt Bea's sympathetic demeanor shifted. "I knew they wouldn't manage a full day without work intruding," she said, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "It's always the store first, isn't it? Not like with me, you're always my priority, Oliver." The comment stung because it echoed Oliver's own disappointed thoughts, yet hearing it spoken aloud felt like a betrayal of his parents. At Aunt Bea's house, she suggested they watch a movie together, even though it was still light outside. "I rented that new superhero film you mentioned," she said, ushering him to the couch in the living room, where the curtains were already drawn, creating an artificially dark environment. As the movie started, Aunt B sat unusually close, draping an arm around Oliver's shoulders. When he tried to shift away, she tightened her grip slightly. "Aunt B, I need to use the bathroom," Oliver said, desperate for an excuse to create distance. "The movie just started," she said with a slight frown. "Can't it wait?" "No, I really need to go." She sighed but released him. "Hurry back." In the bathroom, Oliver splashed cold water on his face, trying to calm his racing heart. He didn't want to return to the couch, to the uncomfortable closeness, but couldn't think of a reasonable excuse to avoid it. When he returned, Aunt B had prepared a milkshake for him, chocolate, his favorite. "Special treat for my special boy," she said with a smile that once would have seemed merely kind but now felt somehow threatening. Oliver sipped the milkshake slowly, deliberately keeping his attention fixed on the movie. As the story unfolded on screen, he began to feel unusually drowsy. His eyelids grew heavy, and keeping his head upright became difficult. Feeling tired, Aunt B asked, her voice sounding strange and distant. "Why don't you rest your head on my shoulder?" "I don't mind." Alarm bells rang faintly in Oliver's mind, but his thoughts were becoming jumbled. This wasn't normal tiredness. Something was wrong. With tremendous effort, he stood up, the room tilting alarmingly around him. "I don't feel good," he managed to say. "I need to call my mom." "Don't be silly," Aunt B replied, her voice firmer now as she stood and took his arm. "You're just tired from your busy day. Come lie down in the guest room. I'll take care of you." Fear cut through the fog in Oliver's mind. With strength born of desperation, he pulled away from her grasp and stumbled toward the front door. His coordination was off, and he knocked over a small table by the entrance, sending a vase crashing to the floor. "Oliver," Aunt B called sharply. "Stop this nonsense immediately." But Oliver had already fumbled the door open and staggered outside. The evening air helped clear his head slightly as he moved unsteadily down the front walk. He could hear Aunt B behind him, her voice alternating between angry demands and concerned coaxing. Rather than heading toward his own house, Oliver turned in the direction of his next-door neighbor on the other side, the Johnsons. Mr. Johnson was a police officer. Oliver remembered his parents mentioning this fact during neighborhood discussions. He made it halfway up the Johnsons' driveway before his legs gave out completely. As he collapsed onto the concrete, he heard Mrs. Johnson's startled voice from her front porch where she had been watering plants. "Oliver." "Oh my goodness, what's wrong?" Then Aunt Bea's voice, breathless from hurrying after him. "He's not feeling well, too much excitement at the water park today. I'll take him home." Oliver summoned his remaining strength to call out, "Don't let her take me. Please. Call my parents." The world tilted and swirled around him as concerned adult voices argued overhead. The last thing Oliver remembered before losing consciousness was Mrs. Johnson's firm voice saying, "I'm calling 911." When Oliver awoke, he was in a hospital room. His mother sat beside his bed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. His father stood by the window, talking in low, intense tones with a woman in a police uniform. "Mom," Oliver's voice came out as a croak. Laura's head jerked up, relief flooding her face. "Oliver, thank God." She gently took his hand, careful of the foreline attached to it. "How do you feel, sweetheart?" "Weird. Tired." His memories were jumbled, but fear rose in his chest. "Where's Aunt B?" His mother's expression hardened in a way Oliver had never seen before. "You don't need to worry about her. She can't come near you anymore." The police officer approached the bed, her manner gentle but professional. "Hello, Oliver. I'm Officer Rivera. I'm glad to see you're awake. The doctors say you're going to be just fine." Robert joined them at the bedside. "Son, do you remember what happened at Mrs. Wilson's house?" Oliver's memories began to sort themselves into a clearer picture: the milkshake, the sudden drowsiness, his desperate escape. He nodded slowly. "Can you tell us?" Officer Rivera asked. "Take your time." Looking at his parents' concerned faces, Oliver felt the dam of secrecy finally break. Words poured out about the inappropriate touching, the isolation from friends, the gifts and demands for secrecy, and finally, the drugged milkshake and his terrified flight. As he spoke, his mother's grip on his hand tightened, and his father's face grew increasingly pale and taut with barely controlled anger. "You're very brave to tell us this," Officer Rivera said when he finished. "None of this was your fault, Oliver. Mrs. Wilson was wrong to do these things." "We didn't know," Laura whispered, tears streaming down her face. "All this time, and we didn't see what was happening." Robert placed a hand on her shoulder. "We know now," he said firmly, "and we're going to make sure she never comes near our son again." Officer Rivera explained that Mrs. Johnson had called 911 when Oliver collapsed. Paramedics had rushed him to the hospital, where blood tests revealed he had been given a sedative mixed into his milkshake. Police had immediately arrested Beatrice Wilson, who was now in custody facing multiple serious charges. "What happens now?" Oliver asked, overwhelmed by the rapid changes. "Now you rest and recover," Officer Rivera said kindly. "In a few days, when you're feeling better, I'll need to take your official statement. But you don't need to worry about that right now." After the officer left, Oliver's parents stayed close, one on each side of his hospital bed. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Oliver said in a small voice. "I was afraid you'd be mad about the gifts, or that you'd think I was making trouble when you were so busy with the store." Laura shook her head vehemently. Nothing is more important than you, Oliver. Not the store, not anything. We should have made that clearer." "We let you down," Robert added, his voice rough with emotion. "But that changes today. We're going to be there for you, son. Whatever it takes." As Oliver drifted back to sleep, exhausted by medication and emotional release, he felt his parents' hands holding his anchors of safety in a world that had become frightening and uncertain. For the first time in months, he slept without fear, knowing that the truth, painful as it was, had finally set him free from Aunt Bea's manipulative web. Oliver spent 2 days in the hospital while doctors monitored his recovery from the sedative Beatrice Wilson had given him. During this time, a child psychologist named Dr. Martinez visited, introducing herself as someone who talked with kids who had gone through difficult experiences. With her gentle guidance, Oliver began to understand that what had happened wasn't his fault. Dr. Martinez explained concepts like grooming and inappropriate boundaries in terms he could comprehend, helping him see how Aunt Bea had systematically manipulated him. "Grown-ups who want to harm children often start by giving special attention and gifts," Dr. Martinez explained. "They work to separate kids from their families and friends, and they use a child's natural desire to be polite and not cause trouble. You did nothing wrong, Oliver. In fact, you showed incredible courage by running away when you sensed danger." Oliver's parents participated in some of these sessions, their faces reflecting pain and guilt as they learned the warning signs they had missed. Yet there was healing in these difficult conversations, two bridges of understanding being rebuilt between parents and son. On the day of Oliver's discharge, Detective Carmen Rivera returned for a more detailed statement. With Dr. Martinez present for support, Oliver recounted everything he could remember about his months with Beatrice Wilson. "You're doing great, Oliver," Detective Rivera said, her voice gentle but professional as she took notes. "I know this is hard, but your statement will help make sure Mrs. Wilson can't hurt any other children." This knowledge gave Oliver strength to continue, despite the difficulty of revisiting painful memories. When they finished, Detective Rivera thanked him sincerely. "You should be very proud of yourself," she told him. "Many adults wouldn't have had the presence of mind you showed when you realized you were in danger." As the Wills family prepared to leave the hospital, Dr. Martinez provided referrals to a therapist who specialized in helping children recover from trauma. "Healing is a process," she explained to all of them. "It will take time, but with support, Children are remarkably resilient. The drive home was quiet, each family member lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at their house, Oliver hesitated before getting out of the car, his eyes drawn to Aunt Bea's neighboring property where police tape still cordoned off areas of the yard and front porch. "We don't have to stay here," Laura said, noting his discomfort. "We can go to a hotel until we figure out something else." Oliver considered this, then shook his head. "No, this is our home. I don't want her to take that away too." Robert squeezed his son's shoulder, pride evident in his expression. "Let's go inside then. I think we could all use some rest in our own beds." The next few days brought significant changes to the Wells household. Robert hired a full-time manager for the hardware store, despite the financial strain it would place on their budget. Laura rearranged her accounting work to be done primarily from home. They converted a small storage room into a home office so she could maintain the store's books while being present for Oliver. "The store was always meant to serve our family," Robert explained when Oliver expressed concern about these changes. "Not the other way around. We lost sight of that for a while, but we won't make that mistake again." The community response to Oliver's ordeal was overwhelming. When news spread about what had happened, neighbors organized meal deliveries so the family wouldn't have to worry about cooking. Oliver's baseball coach and teammates sent cards and a team-signed ball. Mrs. Carmichael, his fifth-grade teacher, visited personally, bringing books she thought might interest him during his recovery. "Teachers are trained to watch for signs that a child might be in trouble," she explained to Laura and Robert while Oliver was out of the room. "I noticed changes in Oliver's behavior toward the end of the school year. He became more withdrawn, less engaged. I should have investigated further." "We all miss signs," Laura replied, her voice heavy with lingering guilt. "All we can do now is move forward and make sure Oliver knows he's supported." Legal proceedings began against Beatrice Wilson. The evidence against her was substantial, not only Oliver's testimony and the drugged milkshake, but also disturbing photographs of Oliver found on her computer and journals detailing her obsession with him. Investigators discovered she had previously lived in another state where similar allegations had been made. Though charges were never filed, information that would have come to light had the Wells family conducted a background check before leaving their son in her care. This revelation intensified Laura and Robert's guilt, but their family therapist helped them channel these feelings into constructive action. They began working with a local child safety organization to develop educational materials for other parents about proper vetting of child care providers and recognizing warning signs of inappropriate behavior. For Oliver, the path to recovery had difficult moments. Nightmares disrupted his sleep, and certain triggers, the smell of cinnamon that reminded him of Aunt Bea's cookies, or seeing an older woman with a similar hairstyle, could prompt anxiety attacks. But with consistent therapy and unwavering family support, these episodes gradually became less frequent and less intense. His weekly sessions with Dr. Levine, the child psychologist, provided safe space to process his experiences. Through art therapy, role play, and guided discussions, Oliver learned to understand and manage his emotions while rebuilding his sense of safety and trust. "Recovery isn't about forgetting what happened," Dr. Levine explained during a family session. "It's about integrating the experience into your life story in a way that acknowledges the pain but doesn't allow it to define you." As summer drew to a close and the start of sixth grade approached, Oliver faced the prospect of returning to school with mixed emotions. While he looked forward to seeing friends and starting middle school, he worried about how his classmates would treat him if they knew what had happened. "Kids can be cruel," he confided to his parents one evening. "What if they think it was my fault? Or what if they think I'm weird now?" Laura and Robert exchanged glances before Robert spoke. "You get to decide who knows your story, Oliver. We've spoken with the school principal and your new teachers. They understand the situation and will respect your privacy. And if anyone says anything in kind," Laura added, "remember that true friends stand by you no matter what. Those who judge without understanding aren't worth your worry." The night before school started, Oliver retrieved the showbox of gifts from Aunt Bea from under his bed. He'd kept them hidden there even after everything had come to light, and sure what to do with these complicated objects, items he'd once valued that now carried painful associations. "I was thinking," he said, placing the box on the kitchen table where his parents sat reviewing some store paperwork, "maybe we could donate these to kids who don't have much." Not the tablet or anything with the tracking app she put on it, but the other stuff. It feels wrong to keep them, but maybe they could make someone else happy. His parents looked at him with a mixture of surprise and admiration. That's a wonderful idea, Laura said, reaching out to squeeze his hand. There's a children's shelter downtown that would probably be grateful for donations. Robert nodded in agreement. You're turning something negative into something positive. That takes real strength of character, son. The next morning, Oliver stood at the bus stop, backpack slung over his shoulder, stomach fluttering with typical first-day nervousness. His mother waited with him, having rearranged her schedule to be available for drop-offs and pickups throughout the school year. You've got this, she assured him, straightening his collar. And remember, I'm just a phone call away if you need me. The familiar yellow bus rounded the corner. Before boarding, Oliver gave his mother a quick hug. I know, Mom. I'll be okay. As he found a seat, Marcus slid in beside him, immediately launching into a story about his family's camping trip. The ordinary conversation felt comforting, a reminder that despite everything that had happened, some things remained unchanged. The preliminary hearing for Beatrice Wilson's case took place in late September. Oliver, supported by his parents and Dr. Levine, provided testimony in a closed courtroom setting designed to minimize trauma to child witnesses. Though facing his former neighbor was intensely difficult, he spoke clearly and truthfully about his experiences. I was scared to tell anyone what was happening, he concluded, his voice steady despite the tears that occasionally threatened. I didn't want to cause problems for my parents when they were already worried about their store. But now I know that when something feels wrong, it probably is wrong, and it's important to tell a trusted adult right away. The judge, visibly moved by Oliver's testimony, commended his courage before ruling that sufficient evidence existed to proceed to trial. Facing multiple serious charges and overwhelming evidence, Beatrice Wilson eventually accepted a plea agreement that would ensure she spent many years in prison and would be registered as a sex offender for life. When Oliver learned of this outcome, his reaction surprised his parents. Rather than satisfaction or relief, he expressed sadness. I feel sorry for her in a way, he explained when Laura asked about his response. Dr. Levine says people who hurt kids were often hurt themselves when they were young. It doesn't make what she did okay, but maybe if someone had helped her back then, she wouldn't have become the person who hurt me. This compassionate perspective reflected the emotional growth Oliver had achieved through his recovery process. Rather than allowing his traumatic experience to harden him, he had developed deeper empathy and understanding, qualities that would serve him well throughout his life. As autumn progressed, the Wells family established new routines and traditions. Sunday pancake breakfasts continued, now complemented by Friday game nights and Saturday outdoor adventures. The store remained important but no longer dominated their lives. Robert's new manager proved capable enough that both parents could take weekends off consistently, and Laura's home office arrangement allowed her to be present when Oliver returned from school each day. One crisp October afternoon, as red and gold leaves swirled around their yard, Oliver helped his father rake leaf piles while Laura prepared hot chocolate inside. Dad, Oliver said, pausing with his rake in hand, do you think we'll ever be normal again? Like we were before? Everything. Robert leaned on his own rake, considering the question carefully. I don't think we'll ever be the same as we were before, he answered honestly. But normal is just whatever becomes familiar over time. We're creating a new normal now, one that I think is better in many ways because we understand what really matters. Oliver nodded, absorbing this perspective. I think I like our new normal better too. The hard times showed us what we were taking for granted, Robert continued. Your mom and I will always regret that it took something so terrible to wake us up. But we're grateful every day that you found the courage to speak up before things got worse. Laura emerged from the house carrying 3 steaming mugs on a tray. Hot chocolate break, she called cheerfully. As they sat together on the porch steps, warming their hands on their mugs and admiring their yard work, Oliver felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossibly distant. The memories of what had happened with Aunt Bee would always be part of him, but they no longer dominated his thoughts or defined his identity. In the months that followed, Oliver's recovery continued to progress. He formed new friendships at school, rejoined his baseball team with renewed enthusiasm, and even helped establish a peer support group for kids dealing with difficult experiences. The Wells Hardware home store stabilized financially under the new management structure, allowing his parents to maintain their more balanced approach to work and family life. When the one-year anniversary of Oliver's hospitalization approached, Dr. Levine suggested marking the date with a positive ritual rather than allowing it to become a day of painful remembrance. Anniversaries of traumatic events can be triggering, she explained. By consciously creating a different association with the date, you reclaim it from the trauma narrative. The Wells family decided to use the day for a community service project. Working with a local child safety organization they had connected with during Oliver's recovery, they organized a family safety fair at the community center. Oliver, now 11 and growing in confidence, even volunteered to speak briefly about the importance of trusting one's instincts when something feels wrong. Standing before a small gathering of families, Oliver cleared his throat nervously before beginning. "A year ago, I was in a scary situation that I didn't know how to talk about," he said, his voice growing steadier as he continued. "I kept secrets I shouldn't have kept because I was worried about causing problems for people I cared about. What I learned is that telling the truth, even when it's hard, is the only way to stay safe and get help." His parents watched from the side of the room, their eyes shining with pride and love as their son transformed his painful experience into wisdom that might help other children avoid similar situations. "I also learned that it's never too late to speak up," Oliver continued, "and that when you do, there are people who will believe you and help you. That's what I want every kid to know: you deserve to be safe, and your feelings matter." The simple truth of his words resonated with everyone present. When he finished speaking, the applause was heartfelt, and several parents approached afterward to thank him for his courage in sharing his story. Later that evening, as the family drove home, Laura reached back from the passenger seat to squeeze Oliver's knee. "You did something important today," she said. "You might never know exactly how, but I believe your words will make a difference for someone who needed to hear them." Oliver smiled, looking out at the familiar streets of their town that had once again become places of comfort rather than sources of anxiety. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would likely be challenges ahead as he continued to process his experiences. But he had discovered a resilience within himself that he hadn't known existed, and a deeper connection with his parents than they had shared before. As their house came into view, Oliver thought about how appearances could be deceiving. From the outside, their home looked much the same as it had a year ago, yet everything inside had changed. His parents had learned to prioritize presence over productivity, vigilance over convenience. He had learned to trust his instincts and to speak his truth, even when it was difficult. Most importantly, they had all learned that healing was possible, even from the deepest wounds, when surrounded by love, professional support, and the courage to face difficult truths together. That night, before falling asleep, Oliver added a new entry to the journal Dr. Levine had encouraged him to keep. "Today I talked about the hardest thing that ever happened to me, not because I wanted to, but because maybe it will help someone else. Mom says that's how you turn pain into purpose. I think she's right. I still have bad days sometimes, but mostly I feel stronger now. Not because of what happened with Aunt B, but because of everything that came after, how we all learned to be better at taking care of each other. Dad says sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. Our family had a pretty big storm, but the air is definitely clearer now." He closed the journal and placed it on his nightstand before turning out his light. Through his window, stars were visible in the clear night sky, the same glow-in-the-dark constellation pattern his father had recently installed on his ceiling to replace the faded stickers from his younger years. A small change, but symbolic of the renewal their family had experienced. Oliver drifted towards sleep with a sense of security that came not from naive trust that nothing bad would ever happen again, but from the confidence that whatever challenges life brought, he now had the inner resources and family support to face them honestly and directly. The truth had indeed set him free, not just from Aunt Bea's manipulation, but from the isolation of carrying burdens alone. In finding his voice, Oliver had discovered that courage wasn't about being fearless, but about speaking up even when afraid. It was a lesson he would carry with him throughout his life, and one that would help him guide others who found themselves in their own moments of difficult truth. In the quiet of his room, safe in his own bed, Oliver Wells fell asleep without fear, a boy who had faced darkness and emerged not unscathed, but undeniably stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected to what mattered most.